Hi, Glenys.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating, health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glenys Oyston. And we are Dietitians Unplugged. Welcome back to another Dietitians Unplugged episode. Aaron, I'm happy to hear you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to hear you too. We're recording this in the beginning of, we're doing this intro, right? The middle of March. We are fully coronavirus compliant with our podcast.
And we always have been. So it's
exactly
sort of like how people call like Oreos accidentally vegan. We're like accidentally coronavirus compliant.
We are doing our best at, what do they call it? Social
distancing.
Social distancing. Yes, we are we are distant. So
yeah, and we will continue to be so after the scare passes. So
we're doing it, really just as a matter of convenience, not really as a matter of trying to be ahead of the curve. We are so behind the curve.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know, listening to podcasts is always a safe activity.
Exactly, totally.
So listen to ours a lot.
There you go. And especially, if you're self-quarantined, this is the perfect time to catch up on your podcasts.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy. Netflix and podcasts and...
For sure.
And the couch, oh my. So...
Maybe we'll have to do an episode on like Netflix recommendations. Diet-free, haze-friendly podcast, Netflix recommendations.
Yeah, there are none. Just kidding. I'm sure there's one.
We could how there's we could tell people, okay, at minute 74 of this movie, skip to minute 76 because then because that 2 minutes is all fat phobic.
Right. I feel like that there was a website a long time ago in the 90s. Uh-huh. Was it like Mr. Skin or something like that?
Mr. Skin, yeah. And
they told you all the parts of movies that had naked bits in them.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad that you know about this.
Yeah. Well, it's also like a whole C plot line in Knocked Up.
Oh.
Right, where Jonah Hill and Seth Rogen and all of his cronies, right? They're like, oh my God, we have this great idea, and they're researching it, and the woman that Seth Rogen's dating is like. That they've already done that. It's called Mr. Skin.
I'm glad you have such a good memory for plot lines.
Yeah, well,
because I totally forgot about that. Yeah,
especially C plot line.
Yeah, so our version will be like a haze version of that, and we'll just be like, okay, so skip this minute to this minute where they just talk about diets or something stupid, or talk about weight loss, or bash on their bodies. That's what we're gonna do. We're not really gonna do that, but in our fantasy, we're doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But let's talk about today's episode.
Yeah. Super excited to have Meg Bradbury on. Somebody you knew prior to this, and I hadn't met, and I gotta say is like the coolest person ever.
I would agree. Meg, when I met Meg through the Body Trust certification program, we are not in the same cohort, but we're, because we're both in LA, we connected. Truly one of the most special people within our community, just really caring, really thoughtful, total badass. I think is should be on everyone's radar.
Yes, exactly. And we had just the most fun conversation. Like, honestly, could have talked to her for 2 more hours.
Yeah.
But we, recognize that people have time constraints. So, so we kept it to our usual time, but just so much fun talking to her.
Yeah.
And
totally.
why don't you tell us a little bit about her?
Meg Bradbury, pronouns she and her, is a certified body trust provider, anti-diet nutritionist, accessible yoga teacher, and registered Yoga Alliance yoga and meditation teacher. Meg is in private practice working with individuals, groups, and families, advocating for body acceptance, eating disorder, disordered eating, body shame recovery, freedom with food, joyful movement, and stillness breathwork. Meg's work, guided by the principles of intuitive eating and health at every size, through a social justice and intersectional feminist lens, is centered on aging bodies, body trust for queers, orthorexia, healthism recovery, and generational cycles of shame. She also co-leads Elderqueer Project, an online gathering space for 40-plus queers to connect and build community through conversation about aging in body, relationships, emotions, transitions, trust, and cultural relevance. Meg's practice is fat positive, weight neutral, and LGBTQIA plus affirming. As an eating disorder survivor, Meg's work is centered in the tenets of relational cultural therapy. She holds space for clients of all ages with compassion, empathy, and humor. Meg is a member of the Association of Size Diversity in Health and the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. I think this is a great conversation that many people are really going to enjoy. Again, Meg, you'll hear that this is someone who's very easy to talk to. And I hope that everyone really enjoys this conversation and through it learning to really discover more of Meg's work because she's doing some amazing stuff in the community. So without further ado, here's our interview with Meg Bradbury. Hey, Meg, thanks so much for hopping on the podcast and joining us.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here with both of you.
Yeah, well, we're really happy to have you. We met through our body trust certification. I think we're in different cohorts, but we've because we're also in SoCal, we've just connected on a few different things. And I would say Meg, along with some other folks, you are one of the hugely bright spots in me doing this training because we've become friends and we've done some work together. So it's really awesome to have you on the show. You're going to share some awesome knowledge with our listeners. So welcome.
Thank you. And I feel the same way about you being a bright spot. And it's shocking how few of us there are, and particularly Southern California. So the fact that we've had the benefit of so few of us, and therefore we've gotten to spend a lot of time together, has been amazing, Aaron. I really, really like your friendship.
Yeah.
And we've connected on so many great things.
Yeah, we need all the support we can get around in SoCal. It's
Seriously.
It's pretty fucked up. Yeah. But anyways, we're weathering the storm. Anyways, okay. So we know a little bit about you, but like for our listeners, why don't you share a little bit about your story, how you came to this work, and give us an idea of like what you, what are you doing with the training that you have?
Sure. I kind of came to both eating disorder recovery and body trust work kind of by the process of growing up with parents who body shamed and used non-consensual dieting to try to correct their children's behavior. I have 2 sisters. All of us are in bodies that really like to be small and round. And my parents, for whatever reason, weren't happy with that. So that just opened the doors for a lifetime of eating disorder cycles. And I kind of, through my life, from like age 5 to age 40, kind of went through everything from anorexia and bulimia and binge eating disorder. And orthorexia was kind of the last stand and the most recent, but it was also the most damaging. Through that time, I had various periods of remission, kind of like the 90s were really gentle for me. But then I got pregnant and I got mom bod, and I subsequently kind of dovetailed right back into diet cycling and restriction. And that this time, the last time I kind of added running into the formula, which really woke up kind of this much more diabolical eating disorder voice than I'd ever experienced. And so with bringing running into it, I really needed to go longer and be faster, and I couldn't just run. I had to race, and I couldn't just race. I had to compete. And I hired a coach and a nutritionist. And mind you, I'm in my 40s and not an Olympic runner. I was just a person, but I really felt like I had to achieve and do all these things and be the fastest on my team, even though I was the oldest on my team. And I had to make my body look cut, and I had to cross train, and I had to be lighter and get to this race weight, which I made up in my head. And I manipulated data, I crunched calories, and I managed my electrolytes, and all this stuff was going on inside of my regular life, which was my daughter and my work and my family. And this really took precedence because I just wanted to be the best I could be, and treating my body like a machine. And in fact, it was called Machine by my team. I wanted to fuel up, quote unquote, right, quote unquote, which meant, vegan, organic, pure, soaked, fermented, and rules and more rules. And during that time, it was noticed by people I knew that I was eating differently, and I was looking different, and I was spending a lot of time exercising, and I lost a shit ton of weight. And so everybody started asking me what my secret was. You know how that is. And you look a certain way, people think you're a medical worker, a doctor, or God or something. And so I became certified as a nutritionist for all the reasons that people do when they're sick. Is number one, they think they have all the answers. Number two, they want to talk about food because they're not eating it. And number three, because it just gives you more opportunities to be involved with nutrition and nutrition research and nutrition information. So I went through that, and I got a little science behind my sickness, and I started seeing clients, and I harmed them. And I made them workout plans and meal plans and elimination diets and supplement shit and timing mandates and wellness bullshit practices. And when I finally hit bottom with all that, and that's a story unto itself we can get into if you want, I started to come to the healing work that saved my life. And I realized during that process of recovery that I needed to make reparations somehow to the people I had harmed with the practice I had given them through my nutrition. And that's when I realized I wanted to bring the stuff I was learning through Dana and Hillary and Be Nourished, and body trust work that I'd done in some of the online programs. I wanted to go through the certification training so that I could bring that somehow back to the folks that I felt I had harmed. So that's kind of how I came to body trust and through my cycles of eating disorders through my life.
Wow. And when you said, it's so interesting because when you said, you became a nutritionist for the reasons that all the reasons you do when you're not well. And I was like, yep, check.
Check here too. Check
I know,
here.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody I know, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember thinking like, I'm going to become a dietitian because I want to think about food and I already am thinking about it 24/7. And like
exactly.
You said, because you're not eating it, it's like, yeah. So it's so interesting. But at least, through that, like we all seem to have found some recovery, right? Like it's just, you kind of found the people who kind of could connect you to a different way of thinking.
And there was something you said in there, Meg, that I really resonate with also in this, also this check mark of, yeah, that was me who came into this shit with a bunch of disordered thoughts around it. But this idea that like this work now is about reparations, is about healing and making amends for the harm that I did earlier in my career. I'd never thought about that, but I love how you worded that, because that, I don't know, that just makes framing a little bit about what we do in our own healing work really meaningful.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that one piece right there.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's sort of like we deserve the reparations ourselves. Yeah. And it's not really, as we say in Body Trust, it's not our fault that all of this has happened and all of this has been brought to our lives. But it is, once we realize it, we can work to bring light around us and to the other people that we affect with this stuff. So it's been really, really powerful for me too.
Yeah.
And you mentioned orthorexia at one point, and that was sort of where your eating disorder went at some point.
Yeah.
And so for people who are listening and aren't quite sure what orthorexia is, can you just talk a bit about that? And then also, why do you think it's so pervasive in our culture right now?
Yeah, there's so many things I could say about that. My definition, the way I talk about it is orthorexia is kind of, for me, it was super dangerous, a pathological and progressive obsession with quote unquote healthy food and quote unquote clean eating. For me, it also involved cleaning supplies and body care products and body care practices and medicine and healthcare and supplements and clothing and the rituals I did. So it was not just about the food I put in my body, but it was how I lived my life and how I was around things. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of water, and I was afraid of a flu shot, and I was afraid of, being in a certain kind of car. And it really just, I mentioned this on another podcast, it felt like a virus that just sort of started out small and grew, and I had no agency over it. So that's sort of my definition of it. It wasn't just about food and eating. It was really all encompassing. And I think there's a lot of reasons why it's so pervasive. I think number one, it sneaks up on people. I think maybe with words like, I don't know, wellness and virtuous and detox and cleanse and fast and mindful and all those things kind of infer that we can achieve this higher level of humanity and health and immortality, and we have like cellular superiority and a clear, sharp mind, and we have absolutely no inflammation, and we're sleeping perfectly, and incidentally, the people who seem to have all these things, they're all thin and ripped and affluent, and they have loads of free time to juice, and they're always happy. And that could be you if only you did these things. So I think it's aspirational. It's really stealthy that it's not even thought of as a diet. It's just thought of as this sort of like really aspirational lifestyle. And we also have like fear-based popular media, like foods like sugar and gluten and dairy and meat and grains and oil and legumes and sugar and salt and sugar and sugar and salt and gluten and sugar, fast food junk, all those things that are billed as evil. Netflix documentaries, social media feeds, the TV shows, and even NPR and New York Times, their news, their health stories and health blogging, it's really fear-based, and it's really, I think that we're very susceptible to all of these things because of our daily experience and daily exposure to social media and the 24/7 news cycle, a lot of which talks about this stuff. And then also we live in a really volatile time in politics, and there's so much uncertainty. And I think feeling in power, feeling if we're somehow special or better or in control or sort of pleasing to the dominant gaze. And I think all that shit is really powerful. In our culture, the more we deny and restrict, the more we gain respect and admiration and a sense of achievement. I think all of those create kind of the perfect, fucking thunderstorm for something like anorexia to become the bigger, better, faster, new, the new big thing. And that it's not really on, in the DSM, I think that makes it also a little sneaky too, where it's not, I've been to doctors on my health plan that when I reveal when I let them know I have an eating disorder, I'm in recovery from an eating disorder, they ask what, because they look at me and they look, well, she's not really anorexic or whatever people's bullshit things they use to determine those things. And I have to explain what orthorexia is. And I've had eye rolls. It's like, oh, well, okay, well, whatever. It's like, it's just really not talked about all that much, even though it's so out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I remember first hearing that word when I worked with a girl. This was before I was a dietitian, and she was so focused on food. And I think she was super focused on weight too. She'd already been thin, but I remember she was even thinner at this time. She was like, I'm orthorexic. And she was so thrilled by this idea.
Yeah.
And I was like, what
Wow.
is that? And she would like only eat like it. I don't even know what her parameters were, but I remember it was just really obsessive. And I remember like being like, oh, whatever. And, because I was just like garden variety dieter at that point, who it was like, I didn't really care what kind of foods I ate at that point.
Right.
But then, and I still blame Michael Pollan for a lot of this. Like,
yes.
He just, what was that rule? Like, don't eat anything that contains ingredients that your grandmother wouldn't know what they were. And I was like, you clearly don't know my grandmother, because she would have eaten anything including like probably fertilizer straight from the bag that would have made her thin. Like,
exactly.
Like you don't know how far back that kind of diet culture goes in my family. But yeah. And then I remember I did inherit that orthorexia in the early 2000s, right around that time of Michael Pollan, and he started talking about the beef industry and blah blah blah. But I just remember thinking, it was like I was already thin by most standards, but not feeling like I had arrived at this place of contentment yet.
Right.
And like, what was the next step? Oh, maybe it's purity in food. So like always trying to achieve this like feeling of, am I okay and have I arrived? And like never getting it, but doubling down on like, oh, food should be local and organic and gently massaged, and it should have a really good therapist. And like, it's like you go crazy at some point with this stuff. And then in the end, it was still about being thinner, because then I was just trying to eat less and less and less. So, Aaron, what did you ever experience that sort of orthorexic thing?
I mean, in different ways, yes. I mean, I would say, from my experience, and it's sort of around the same time as Michael Pollan, for sure, this idea of like, what is my food ethic, right? And like, how does ethics play into like what I eat, and that idea of being locally sourced and, ecologically sustainable, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I think the thing that was interesting is what helped it evolve a little bit was this idea of just being flexible, like of saying like, this is what I would like to do maybe most of the time, but like, it's not going to preclude me from stopping at, McDonald's and getting an Egg McMuffin if that's what I really want, right? It's like, and here's the thing that really solidified it for me and that really helped sort of make it flexible was when we had kids. Because when we had kids, we were in the BPA, hysteria of like, what bottles are you supposed to use for your kids, and like, we had twins, we have twins. Feeding was a pain in the ass, period. And we had a lot to worry about aside from the bottle. So whatever bottle they wanted, we're going to drink out of, formula out of, I didn't care what it was. I just like, they're going to use what they're going to use. You're going to stare at me when I go out in public, and that's your issue. Same thing with food dyes. People are like, aren't you worried your kids are going to have too much? No, I'm not going to worry. You know why? Because I have enough stuff going around in my head that like, I just don't have the bandwidth for this. Like, I'm choosing to ignore this, and I'm choosing to, because if I let it in, it's, my kids are going to be breatharians, and I can't do it. And so to me, the underlying thing around Meg, when you were talking about this idea of like, and I loved how you said orthorexia is not just about food, it's about the clothes you wear and the shoes and the what kind of car and whatever that, like, I think it's all fear driven. Like, there's so much fear around everything that like, I need to protect my bubble. I need the bubble to be really strong, because if one thing gets in, like everything, the ecosystem is going to fall apart.
Right. Strong and small.
Right.
Because the less choice you have, for me anyway, when I was sick, the least amount of choices I had to make in a day made me feel like I had more control. It was super interesting. So that's why my food just became less and less. And there was just more and more and more rules and more fear. Like, for example, say nuts. So if I couldn't get, raw organic walnuts that I know hadn't been soaked for a certain amount of time, I just wouldn't eat them. So that there were so many rules around everything. Had to be a certain kind of brown rice. It wasn't just brown rice. It wasn't just organic brown rice. It had to be a certain kind of organic brown rice kind of thing. And I could only have this certain amount. So the rules just became so tight and so constricted. But that was a feeling of safety for me because there was so much chaos swirling in my head, then so much fear swirling in my head that if I knew I could just go to those 5 things, I'd let myself eat, and that was okay. So that became a lot of the control too, was making my bubble tight and small.
Yeah. Ugh. It's the memories are flooding back, right?
Yeah, it's hard to think about. It's so upsetting if you think about, number one, the time I spent just in terms of like, if I throw my running into it, in terms of like how much food or how little food I could get away with for this many miles, for X number of miles, or, the timing of it. Like if I had a certain thing 20 minutes after I was done running, then I could act. I mean, it's just the amount of data in my head all the time, and the time that it took me to crunch all that data is phenomenal. It makes me really sad, like you said. It's so interesting to think I even had the time. I don't know how I made the time.
Right. And here's the kicker. Everybody's congratulating you.
Oh, yes.
Like so you hear all that and like maybe the person who's never had these experiences would be like, well, that's crazy. Why would you do all that? And, that sounds horrible. But that same person, if they were seeing us, you, me, at the time, it's like, oh, I remember people being like, oh, you're so thin now. And being like, wow, how do you do it? And they were probably saying that to you too, right?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. Or even asking for medical advice.
Right.
I remember this person I don't know what I was doing, but I was actually walking around the hallway at my work holding a green smoothie or something ostentatious and probably feeling really, ooh, look at me. And that's, again, we also, part of orthorexia is the ego and the morality attached. Like you really do think you're doing something that it's anointed and special, and you're somehow far superior and far more evolved than anybody who would dare eat a piece of bread.
Yeah. It's our new religion. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so this person said, I think there's something wrong with my liver. and I'm just with my juice like, hi, I'm not even through with my nutritionist, my, namby-pamby nutritionist program. And they're like asking me to diagnose not only a sluggish liver, but what should they do for it? But basically because of how I looked, which is so fucking curious to me and so dangerous. But yet we grab onto people who present these facts as if they're evidence, as if they're science, because that's the way our whole social media is set up, to just grab onto the latest thing and throw it out like it's science, like we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you mentioned social media, and I think that's one of your most compelling ways how you communicate a lot of these things. I really love your Instagram pages where you just sort of turn on the video and you just talk, and they're awesome.
Thank you.
One of the things that you've been starting to do a lot, with your social media is actually, starting even a different page called Elderqueer, and talking about eating disorders in older adults.
Yes.
I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your work with that and what you're noticing as that conversation is starting.
Yeah, the whole Instagram thing and my recovery was really powerful, and it was so helpful. I felt really alone in my recovery a lot of the time, and my therapist suggested that I make it more public somehow. And so one of my first Instagram posts with the hashtag of orthorexia recovery was me eating a challenge food. And it didn't, nobody understood in my life. It didn't get a lot of hits and people were so confused. But at the same time, for me inside, it felt like, oh my gosh, I've released something. And this feels super powerful and amazing. And while it was very difficult, I decided to keep going and get pretty public about it. So using social media, using particularly Instagram, because that's actually the only thing I do use, became a platform for me to go through the body trust provider certification and to go through, you can actually scroll back in one of my Instagrams and see me being sick. It's really fascinating to sort of watch the trajectory of being sick and then being sort of enlightened to being sick and then becoming aware. And it's like its whole story. But with Elderqueer, how that started was I kind of came into the really active part of perimenopause at the same time I was mid-recovery. And I started looking at what was typically available online or in books or whatever for me to read about and learn about in terms of my aging process in my body. And the typically available information just wasn't safe. And there's, again, with the fear mongering, there's aging in a culture that really fears aging and the weight gain and belly fat and longevity and how you can manipulate your health and the presumed sexual dysfunction and being pleasing to the dominant gaze and the expectation that we're supposed to work against the clock by staying youthful. All this kind of brought back some behaviors and it felt really unsafe to me. And so I started looking for an alternative to that, adding in the fact that I'm queer, and that's a whole different experience in your body and in aging. And so I didn't find anything that I felt was safe for me and brave for me, and it didn't have the elements of community that I wanted. I just couldn't find anything, so I decided to start it. And I just put an invitation out on my lamplight on my regular Body Trust Instagram saying, hey, if you're older or your body's changing or you're over 40 and looking for community, I'm going to start a online Zoom gathering, once a week for a month, come talk. And that's what started Elderqueer. And people were automatically kind of interested, and it built a really great community, and we've sort of kind of gone running from there. So that's how Elderqueer started. But yeah, aging in terms of eating disorder and eating disorder treatment, it's really hard for an older person. I think I came into, really troublesome orthorexia in my late 40s. And I probably would have greatly benefited from residential, but as somebody in their late 40s, number one, I couldn't afford to leave my job. And number two, I knew there wasn't going to be anybody like me there. And I was very scared of that. And so telling my story and finding very few people to hear it, it's a lot of stigma attached to that.
Yeah. We were talking about that before we hit record about how and Aaron was mad at us because we hadn't hit record yet.
Well, because we were saying brilliant stuff.
Yeah. Well, basically saying there's so much age phobia out there now. And I think too, the other thing that happens when you hit around 40, late 40s is that things start going wrong in your body. And there's this perception that I think in the medical world is you better fix this. And I'm like,
yes.
I can't help that my arteries are hardening to some degree. That is just going to happen. Obviously there's many things I can do to help myself, right? But the reality is sometimes we're just going to do a ton of stuff in our lives and things will still go wrong. I have clients who are exercising and eating, well, and varieties of food, and they're recovering from their eating disorder, and they still have high blood pressure.
Right.
And that runs in their family, and they're getting to the age where it starts to show up. And so I think that's why you can be really vulnerable in your older years to this, disordered eating and eating disorders.
Yeah.
And we were saying before, people are so afraid of the word old too, where it's don't say you're old. And it's I didn't say I was a monster. I just said I'm old.
Right, exactly.
And it explains why you don't know all cool TV shows I know from the 70s, like Gilligan's
Island,
right?
Yes, indeed. So
yeah.
I love running into old people because we know these things.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you know pop culture before 1999? Amazing. Let's talk.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. And I think we were also comparing or paralleling how when, people use the word fat, it's considered a weapon, or it's considered, ooh, you don't say that because that's too insulting. And same with old. It's like, don't say that. Don't tell her she's old. It's like, okay, we know when we're fat and we know when we're old, and it's not a crime to be either.
Right.
So
and
call it.
My mom died when she was 51. Like, what a gift it is to be able to get past that.
Yes.
Like, we are going to get old if we're lucky.
Right.
Right? Like, that's the best possible outcome here. So,
and also it's like, we our fear of aging, and it's all about losing our looks and our fuckability, really.
Yep.
But there's so many, like in cultures that aren't ours, or in times long ago, aging was normalized, and the natural process of aging was sort of reverence, and you'd find wisdom and respect and lineage and community and love, and you find animal communities where the matriarch, the elephant, the matriarch, the oldest of the elephant herd, is kind of tended to, and lovingly everybody slows down for her, and she's the wisest one because she has the most experience and the most history and the most young folk around her. And that's revered. And I think in a lot of ways, and I'm talking very gendered, but I think in a lot of ways, we've lost our own capacity to even feel compassion for older folks in our society.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. If you think true, and if you think how excited people get when they meet a turtle that's like 100 years old, but like people freak out about turning 50.
Right.
Like, hey,
so
right. I need or 60 or 70 or whatever. I think you're only allowed to get excited about your age again once you're past 80. Because I used to work in a geriatric population, and they'd be so excited to tell me how old they were, especially if they were over 90. Like, I'm 98. It's like, yeah, I know. Isn't that exciting? But we're only allowed to celebrate it when we get super old.
That's true. It's like I've been known to recently. I start rounding up. I'm 57. And I've started rounding up to 60 so that, this is kind of pathetic, so that people go, wow, you look really good for 60.
Well, I round up too. I start at the beginning of the year because my birthday's not till May, and I start at the beginning of the year. I've always already rounded up, and not for that reason, but just so like I'm used to it when it comes around. But then I get confused because by the time my birthday shows up, I now think I'm a year older than I actually am.
Exactly. Then you forget.
Oh wait, I forgot I was rounding up because I'm a little older, so I don't remember things as well anymore.
Exactly.
But like, there's a wonderfulness also about getting older, because we were talking to like our 30s were like a pile of crap.
Oh,
and our 40s might have been figuring stuff out. Like I was just graduating from school to become a dietitian at 41 or 40, something like that, one of the 42, and can't remember. And but I was like finally starting to figure my life out as I got older. And when people get so upset, like I say, I'm old, that's why we don't understand what we're saying to each other. And my one friend was like, you're not allowed to say you're old. I'm like, so it's not a bad thing.
Right. Right. And if you're not allowed to say it now, when can you?
Yeah. Do you know the big freak out you're about to have when you're 40, which is only 3 years away for you, the person I'm talking to, right? So it's like, get used to it and kind of celebrate it. Things aren't going to work the same, but also like, let's figure out how to have compassion for that for ourselves.
I'm wondering, listening to, as we talk, Glenys, and we're both AFAB, I'm wondering what it's like for dudes, Aaron.
Yeah, as you were thinking about it, like I think I have so much more freedom in this area than y'all. I mean, like people, I think there's conversations around men around aging, our body aging, not being able to like perform either athletically or like do the sort of physical things that we used to be able to do. But I think we're given a lot of leeway about aging and what we look like as we age and what our bodies need to look like as they go through that process. So I think there's a ton of privilege on my end in this. There's just it's dripping with privilege.
It's so curious. And if I think about like the difference in medicalization or even the capitalism involved in something like Viagra.
Yeah.
Versus something like vaginal dryness. Those are both kind of like age jokes for cis men and women. And it's like, I think there's a status thing. I don't know. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'm just working this out in my head. There's a status thing maybe with Viagra. It's like, well, all I got to do is take a pill and I'm all fixed. And then, or with vaginal dryness, is like, well, you're a fucking dried up witch now. So who wants to fuck you anyway? I mean, it's so interesting I haven't even thought about that. I'm obviously just sort of unpacking this right here, right now.
Listen, right now. Yeah.
Well, listen, I think there's for sure something there. I mean, like, listen, the amount of funding and advertisements around Viagra and ED drugs like that are immense. And I even remember, like, at the VA, like, it was easy for veterans to get their Viagra, right? Like that was like not an issue. To maybe get like some other sort of like diabetes medication, that might have been a little bit harder, right? Because that's not in a formulary. But God damn it, Viagra is going to be there. And you're going to get your Viagra, no problem.
Yeah, well, it's important. You got to have your hard dick.
Yeah.
Well, but I was always surprised at the ages at which they would be getting it, like in their 80s, and I was like, wow, what is that still necessary? You're still thinking about that? But it was almost like it's just something that I'm not even sure. Like if somebody is like a real diagnosis of erectile dysfunction, the other ED, right? Like this is a great life-saving medication.
Right.
Not life-saving, but
right.
Quality saving. But then I think that there's also this, what is going on is that you're just getting older and there's a natural decline in sexuality. And I don't know if that's the right word, but basically, and maybe libido or whatever.
Yeah.
And, well, you don't need to suffer the effects of old age. You can just take the pill and it's erased. And, I don't see those things coming. Where's the pill for women whose libido has declined?
Right.
In their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. It's like, you don't need a pill,
or else you're just like, well, who wants to fuck her anyway? It's like she's bitter and old and, crony and all the things. And yeah, I think there's a lot of patriarchy there. A lot of
why would we make a pill for you? Because clearly you've stopped having sex after the age of 40.
Right.
Well, and that's because all the men who are taking the Viagra are now dating women half their age. Right. Which is expected to, right. Which is totally acceptable.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, society is doing its best to give the aging concerns to men. So, like, we might see that increase over time where men are just as anxious about aging as women are. And
I think there is. And I think, I'm thinking of, like, the other infomercials I see. It's all for, like, testosterone, like over-the-counter tea, like for men as they age, right? Because God forbid you that decreases and you're not masculine anymore.
Right.
I think that's the issue that shows up.
Well, it's also the whole, like, the difference between staying youthful or, quote unquote, letting yourself go. And it's either black or white. You're either going to, make sure that you, even through plastic surgery or, obviously the affluence of how you dress or whatever, staying relevant, staying youthful, and anything other than that, including body changes, including belly fat, which is completely intended and natural in midlife and later life, that's just letting yourself go. And there's no in between. There's no progression towards that point. That's natural. And all of this is just, it's not letting ourselves go. It's nature. Our bodies are slowing down.
Right.
They're supposed to.
Yeah. At the same time, I feel like intellectually, I'm probably hitting my peak.
Yes.
And
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, like and that's it's the culmination of all my life experiences, and then also like just calming down about stuff for whatever reason. I'm still anxious. I still have anxiety. That's just who I am. But But overall, I can then rationalize and say, well, you're anxious because you're an anxious person. 2, can you rationalize this out? 3, is there something you can do to calm yourself? Versus like 15 years ago, I had no tools to do any of that. And so there's something wonderful about getting older where I just feel like I'm really at my peak in terms of like what I want to give to the world and how I can do that. And it's exciting, and people don't really think about that. I think it's just people get so wound up with, oh my God, I'm getting a gray hair. I'm going to dye my hair. And it's so funny because I used to always think I was going to dye my hair as I got older because my mother did that. My grandmother did that. And then my partner is just so like such a hippie. And he's like, what? What's wrong with gray hair? And all it took was that for me to go like, yeah, what is wrong with gray hair? Gray hair's pretty awesome. And then meeting people who are like, parading it around like it was super great color. And anyway, it's just like accepting that, hey, this is maybe what's going to happen in older age. And why is that wrong?
Right. It's like, and I'm sorry to be a broken record, but it's like, bringing it back to body trust. I mean, body trust for mid to late age older folks it's the same core elements of a body trust practice that we talk about all the time. So allowing pleasure, determining your own needs and boundaries, and exploring your body and your body changes with curiosity rather than judgment, and finding community and sort of rebuilding trust. This is all so important to the aging process as much as it is, and in different ways than it is, to accepting our body size and our body shape and body diversity. This is one of the things I learned in my own aging, is that I can apply all that I learned from body trust and all that I've learned from my recovery to my aging process. And it's different, but it's just as poignant and it's just as productive.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. And all this stuff has such profound meanings in later life for some reason. And I don't know if that's because I'm able to filter out the bullshit a little more readily, like you were saying, Glenys. It's like you sort of know yourself better, and you know what you can kind of like ignore and what you can embrace a little bit more. But body trust becomes this sort of like nucleus of a tool bag you can go to.
Yeah.
Which is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Thinking about, so you're a yoga instructor as well. And I would love to hear, I presume that you also work with older people as well as larger bodies.
I work with a lot of different kinds of people.
Okay.
I would love to work with, here's something where my age bullshit comes in. I was going to say seniors. I don't really know what I mean when I say seniors. I guess I'm picturing somebody like my parents. So, people
65 plus. Officially.
So I would say I haven't worked with anybody older than 68. So like 70s, 80s. I think that would be really fun.
Okay.
But I haven't done that. But certainly people in mid-age to later age, my age, sure, 50s, early 60s. Yoga's been in and out of my life for a lot of years. It super swooped in when I was sick as a way to cross-train on my rest days. And of course, those rest days, it was a different kind of yoga that I'm doing now. The rest day, quote-unquote, yoga was like really hard, sweaty cardio, hours long, vinyasa.
Yeah.
But I became really connected with the idea of breathing and body movement in tandem with one another. And so coming back to actual yoga versus punishment yoga, which seems to be common in LA.
Yeah, seriously.
You go to yoga classes and everybody's coming out, dripping with sweat and exhausted and needing a nap. And to me now in my yoga practice, that seems really extreme. But the first class I took from a yoga teacher who was fat, this was in recovery. Her class was gentle and supported, and there was a sense of community in the room. And I realized that was the kind of yoga I wanted to reconnect to. I had almost a whole year of no exercise whatsoever. And when I came back to yoga, I thought I really need to be very specific about how I wanted to be on the mat. And being on the mat for me meant I'm just looking at myself. I'm in this kind of sacred space of connecting my breath and my body and being embodied, when I had the opportunity to take yoga teacher training, because this is another aspect I wanted to bring to my clients in my body trust practice, doing breathing, doing stillness, doing a little bit of movement, and having it mean breath, which is always there, and breath inside of your body, which is always there. It just became so evident to me that this is available to most anybody who has breath. And so I did accessible yoga teacher training. It's real specific. It's a thing. And my teacher for that teacher training was Amber Carnes. I don't know if you know who Amber Carnes is.
I think I know her name.
Body positive yoga.
Yeah.
Really amazing. Such a great teacher. And she just gave me the tools and the ideas to, I don't like the word modify, but to adjust any practice so that even if a person who, in fact, we talked about a practice of a person who doesn't have any movement from the neck down because of an accident, they're paralyzed, or a blind person, or a person in a wheelchair, or paraplegic, or somebody in a super fat body, or somebody in a very immobile older body. All people can do a yoga practice because basically what it is connecting breath and body. So the person with no movement from the neck down could link their breathing with moving their eyes. So you would inhale and look up at the ceiling, and exhale and move your eyeballs to the right. Inhale, look down, exhale, look to the left. And that's a yoga practice. And realizing that was like, fuck, I can do this. I can teach this. I can bring this. I can do this myself with everybody. And this is exactly what yoga is. It's being in tune. Yoga means to yoke. So being in tune with your breath and your body. And it doesn't fucking matter what your body is or what your body looks like or how your body moves. It's just bringing the breath into tune with your body.
I'm so excited to hear you talk about that for people with spinal cord injuries, because my first job as a dietitian was working in a spinal cord injury unit. And, you know, that's one thing. It was a great job to think about people who don't have feeling or movement below the neck. Yeah. And that you're making this accessible to somebody like that.
Yeah.
Is so exciting because they also need this, right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a sense of, you know, this sounds really, really trite, but there's a sense of calm and a sense of peace that you cultivate when you use your breath in connection with moving a part of your body. And what that movement is completely up to you and completely up to the capacity of your body, but it's not right or wrong. So it's kind of like in the way I do my yoga classes now, which I'm just opening one called Yoga for Tired Transgressors. And it's sort of like, come as you are, come in your fucking shorts. I don't care. Bring a grungy mat, lay down on the ground the whole time. It doesn't matter. You're in community. You're hearing the breath of other people. You're able to connect. You're hearing the music. Do what you want. It's all up to you. This is your practice, and it's all yoga.
Who is this class aimed at? Because I really like the name of it.
Well, what it was is, I guess I just said like queer folks, old folks, fat folks, tired folks, lazy folks.
I love
people who just need to get out of the house for an hour and a half and be with another group of people who want to get out of the house for an hour and a half and somehow move and somehow be in community.
Okay, I'm coming to that.
Yeah, do.
It's brilliant, right?
Yeah, I'm coming to that because I like fit into several categories, but especially the lazy.
Excellent. It's great. And it's like my thing would be like, don't everything I say is a suggestion. I got this from my yoga mentor, Jessica. Everything I say is a suggestion. If it doesn't seem right to you, you don't need to do it. And that's yoga, right? It's like you're following what feels right in your body. It's like intuitive eating. You're following what feels right. And for your appetite and for your hunger level and for your body right then. Same as movement, same as yoga. If I want to just lie there the whole time, I'm fine with that.
That's amazing because I can tell you that I've been turned off of yoga classes in LA, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
And I've injured myself in them as well. So
have I, absolutely.
And that is probably part of me and not being able to, you know, and bringing some weird competitiveness into it with my own body. But, you know, I need an instructor like you who's telling me, hey, settle down. You know, you can just do what feels okay.
Right. And I think you mentioned a good point, because it's really hard to make yourself vulnerable to walk. And I would say, especially in LA or probably in New York too, it's hard to make yourself vulnerable and walk into the room, particularly if you think you're going to be the only one in the body you're in, you know, whether it's fat or whether it's old or whether it's, you know, visibly queer or whatever. I think it's really hard to be the other in a yoga space in Los Angeles.
I would say joining any fitness class in a larger body, any city you go to, is going to be challenging, period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot
especially
of bravery.
Yoga.
Yeah. Well, and yoga, what Amber calls yoga Barbie, it's like that's the kind of idea people have in their head about the people who should be doing yoga. They're usually cis women, usually white, usually thin, usually affluent seeming, usually smiling, laughing, eating yogurt. And to be anything other, and also doing like the hardest inversion on a beach in Hawaii. You know, that's our picture of a yoga person. That's not necessarily who, you know, started doing yoga in India, but that's what westernized yoga has come to mean.
Right. It's all about your hot body.
Yes, and it's very off-putting to want to walk into the room, even if you think you want to try yoga. It really takes a certain amount of bravado and humility. And, you know, it's you've been a person in the back of the room. Diane Bondi, who's a fat yogi, she's amazing. She tells a story about she's had years and years of yoga in her life, but she'll still walk into a city where maybe she's teaching. She wants to try a class at some other yoga studio. And so she'll go in, and because she's in a black body, she's in a fat body, she'll kind of go to the back of the room because she doesn't want to be recognized or whatever. And people will say, oh, you know, here's the, you know, you may need to modify your movements. They'll just make a lot of assumptions about how she can or can't move because of the body she's in. And I think that's also damaging.
Meg, you shared some amazing stuff. I really want to thank you for coming on, and I think we need a part 2 at some point really soon, because I think we could go off and have so many other conversations around this stuff.
Yeah.
Where can people learn more about your work?
So much of my work is on Instagram. My Body Trust Instagram is called lamplight.space. And that's where most of what I do is I publicly air everything. As you said, the videos. And then Elderqueer is at elder_queer. And I'm assuming you'll have show notes and you can throw those down.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mostly Instagram is where I'm at. I think www.elderqueer.org is our very bare bones Elderqueer website. We're having our first advisory council meeting. I have a advisory council on Elderqueer. I have some partners in this work, which is really exciting. There's been a lot of community excitement. We're building a mission, and we're determining a marketing agenda and going to do some talks and retreats and things like that. So that's exciting. And my body trust practice, I do individual, group, family, all sorts of different kind of iterations of online and in-person meetings and gatherings and coachings. And so you can find me on Instagram, both those places.
Awesome. We will link to everything in the show notes. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to at some point show up to your yoga class for transgressors.
It starts soon.
Okay. And this has just been the most fun conversation. I love talking with you.
And, I know you too.
And I'm just so grateful that you came on the show.
I'm grateful too. And as I said before we started recording, this show has meant so much to me and to my recovery and to my sense of peace and well-being as I was progressing through my recovery. So thank you so much for so many years of this work. It's really groundbreaking.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that means a lot.